that idea of trusting God is huge. And in all kinds of situations in life, it can be one of those things where when we don't feel like we can see God, feel God, touch God, hear God, it can be so easy to go like, okay, I'll handle it. Anybody with me? When we just go, all right, not sure what God's doing, so I will take control, thank you very much. And I want to say this to you as an adult, that this whole trusting God thing, what you see in adults around you, is a preview of things to come. Because it's not like, oh, once you graduate from high school, it gets easy. Oh, once you become a teenager, everything just kind of, once you get to be 21, 21's the magic number, and then you guys, trusting God takes a pursuit. And to not trust God means we're going to compensate in some way. We're going to step in and try and take control in some way. And this is not new. This isn't something that, your generation struggles with. This is not something that my generation struggled with. But, you read the Bible, man, God showing up the way that people expected him to, or God not showing up in the ways that people expected him to, was a major thing. And it created massive issues, huge problems in people's lives as they made the choice, am I going to trust in what God has? Am I going to trust that God does care, that God is actually here? Or am I going to decide, you know what? God, you're taking too long. God, I don't understand what's going on, and so, mine. And I'll just take control. Yeah? We all identify with this, right? We all have stuff in our lives where it's been, God, what am I supposed to do? And then you come to church, and I don't know about you, but growing up, and even now, man, coming to church can be really frustrating. Because, man, you ever come to church and it seems like everybody else has got it together? Everybody else is like this with God. Everybody else loves Jesus. You see people, you look over, you look down the row, and during the music time, people are like, right? It's like, look at that girl, she's on her knees. Man, I wish God loved me that way, right? And it can be really demotivating to come to church sometimes because we go, why isn't God showing up for me like that? Well, can I just encourage you tonight? You are not alone in that. You are not a bad person. You're not a bad Christian. It doesn't mean that you don't love God. It means that you may have to wait. God's not punishing you. God's not holding back from you and be like, grace, not yet. But God promises this. He has life for you. He has abundant life for you. He doesn't have just eke by and struggle and hurt and just, He wants to bring life, and he's going to do something. And I don't know what it's going to look like. I'm pretty sure if your life is anything like my life, it's going to look different than you think it's going to look. It's going to look different, maybe even than you want it to look. Come on, God. And there are, if there's any hope or how do we know it's going to be okay or that I'm not the only one? Well, you can look at the Bible. The children of Israel, the Hebrew people, were enslaved for 430 years. I had a bad week. 2015 or 2017 wasn't the greatest for me, right? 430 years. Generations of people in bondage. Generations of people being beaten, tortured, killed. And these were supposed to be God's people. God's chosen people. And for 430 years, they're enslaved. And then God starts to move. God starts to do stuff that, honestly, you look back on and you're like, oh, well, if God moved like that in my life, I'd listen. No, you wouldn't. You know how I know? Because they didn't. Right? 430 years. And then God begins to move. He starts doing miraculous things, like bringing plagues on the Egyptian people who were enslaving them, right? God sends this guy, Moses, and Moses goes, hey, God's going to set you free. Would you believe that? Probably not. Right? Some guy shows up. You've been enslaved. Your grandparents, your parents, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, your great-great-grandparents, your great-great-great-grandparents were all enslaved, and here comes Mo. Don't worry. God's going to set you free. I'm going to go talk to the Pharaoh. And then flies and locusts and boils and rivers turned into blood. And then the oldest child in every Egyptian household dead. God begins to move and begins to demonstrate, hey, I have a plan. I'm going to set you free. I will be faithful. I know this feels like a long time. I know you had to wait a long time. I know you probably thought that I'd forgotten about you. I haven't forgotten about you. I have life for you, and I'm going to set you free. And so God sets people free. Miraculously. Like I said, there were plagues. When they were released from Egypt, they're leaving Egypt and they're being led by pillars of smoke and pillars of fire. They get to the Red Sea, and Moses walks up to the Red Sea and looks like he's going to conduct an orchestra, and all of a sudden the water parts, and they walk right through the middle of the Red Sea, and they escape the Egyptians. Would you believe in God then? I'd love to say, yeah. I'd love to be like, well, sure. If God did those kinds of miracles, no way would I ever not believe in him. No way would I ever be like, well, maybe God's not. Maybe God doesn't know what we're going through. Maybe God isn't like really in control. And yeah, we can think that. So now the children of Israel are out of Egypt. They're free from bondage. And God begins to speak to them in pretty dramatic fashion. It's sort of like they portray in the movies, where the sky and the clouds and thunder and lightning, and God begins to speak. And God begins to tell people, here is how I am going to set you apart. Here is how I'm calling you to live, and you are going to live in victory. You're going to live in freedom. Just follow me. And the people's initial response is, Moses, could you please tell God to stop talking to us because we might die? God was so intense that the people were like, we don't want God to speak to us anymore. Can you imagine being in that situation? To be like, I don't want God to speak to me because the power of God speaking to me might just blow my head off. There it went. But they actually tell Moses, hey, Mo, you go talk to God. Let God talk to you, because if he blows your head off, well, then we'll know. But you go talk to God, and then you kind of just relay the message, right? And so God pulls Moses off to the side, and he starts talking to Moses. And this is what God says to Moses. He says, hey, go tell the people that you saw for yourself that I spoke to you from heaven. And remember, okay, this is a direction from God. You must not make any idols out of silver, out of gold, no idols. It wasn't like God forgot to mention this. And I'm explaining this because in just a minute, you're going to see that the children of Israel were a bunch of knuckleheads. And they just like, what? So as quick as we are to be like, oh, well, if God spoke to me, if God did a miracle, if God told me not to, slow down. So here, God says to Moses, look, you tell them they are not to make any idols out of gold, out of silver, nothing. And then he promises some things to his people. Here are the things that God promises. He says, look, I'm going to send the angel of the Lord before you, and he is going to pave the way for you. Would you like that promise in your life? Would you like God to declare that over your life? He says, I'm going to send an angel to prepare the way for you and to mark the path so you know how to follow me. He says, you know what? Your enemies will be my enemies. You ever had a friend tell you they got your back? Feels pretty good, right? Where you can walk, you're like, I don't have to worry about anything because I know that I'm not alone. I know. God tells his people, he promises his people, look, your enemies, anybody who's an enemy of you is an enemy of me. And I'm going to take care of it. Then he tells them, you must not worship the gods of foreign lands. He tells them, don't get entangled with these people who don't believe in me, who are going to have all these things. They're going to have all these ways that they say, hey, you should worship this. Hey, this is going to provide power for you. This is going to make your life better. This is going to be what you really want it to be. And all those times when God doesn't really show up, hey, this will be the thing that never fails you. And so God goes, as the angel prepares the way, and your enemies are my enemies, and I'm going to protect you, and I'm going to guard you. Do not get entangled with people whose faith is not in me, who are going to present you with all kinds of other idols, other things to worship. And he says, don't get messed up with that. Worship only God, and I'll protect you from sickness. I'll protect you physically, and I will lead the way in your life. And God says, as you move into a land, I am going to empower you to drive the people out. Everything's not going to just be this miraculous, poof, everybody drops dead. He goes, I'm going to empower you to do this work. I'm going to show you that I am with you, and I'm going to empower you in your life. And then he gives some really specific instructions. He says this, that as you go through your life, as you meet people, and they may be nice people, and their cultures, their habits, their advice, their counsel, hello, anybody? It may seem great, and it may be like, hey, that's the cool thing. Hey, that's the new trend. Hey, that's the thing that makes me feel good, and it seems to make a lot more sense than this whole God thing. Here's what God tells them. Make no treaties with them or their gods. They must not live in your land, or they will cause you to sin against me. If you serve their gods, you will be caught in the trap of adultery. You must not embrace them and be like, oh, well, you're nice, and so I guess you can stay. Oh, well, I kind of like the way you do things, and this God, of ours seems to be a little bit, I'm not sure. God goes, what happens when you start to open yourself up to things apart from God is you begin to be attracted to things apart from God. Are you with me? When you open your heart up today in 2019, when you open up your heart to things apart from God, whether it's friends, girlfriends, boyfriends, careers, hobbies, movies, social media, whatever, when you open your heart to things that are not of God, you will be drawn to things not of God. So remember, they told God, hey, don't talk to us, talk to Moses. So God goes, all right, I'll talk to Moses. Moses, come on. Moses heads up the mountain. Mount Sinai, okay? So Moses heads up the mountain, and God had descended over the mountain like a cloud. And so you could only see about half the mountain. So Moses, with his little stick, goes walking up the mountain. And they're watching Moses, and they're like, he's quite a hiker, right? And Moses goes up the mountain into the clouds and just like disappears into the clouds. And the clouds become like fiery red because of the fire of God, the presence of God. And they're like, ooh. Moses smoking. Wonder what's going on up there. And they wait. And they wait. And they're willing to wait for a little while. They're willing to be like, okay. Mo's up there representing. He's up there, doing business with God. When he comes down, we're going to know what we're supposed to do. Here was the problem. It took so long. Moses was gone for so long. Have you ever had to wait for something? We've all had to wait for something, right? This is why we invented microwave popcorn. This is why DVRs were invented, so you can skip commercials. Everything in our culture is about, let's do this right now. Let's hurry up, get me what I want, satisfy my need, satisfy my desire right now, right? Would you agree? I mean, this is our culture. This is where we live. So Moses disappears up onto the mountain, into this smoky mountain. And the people wait, and they wait, and they wait, and it's just taken so stinking long. And it wasn't that, okay, Moses was gone for several hours, or even a few days, or a week. Moses was gone for 40 days. So he goes up the mountain, and the people don't see him for over a month. Now, you can look at that and be like, all right, so how... It wasn't a lack of belief in God. It wasn't that they went, there is no God, we don't believe in God anymore. They just wanted to feel comfort. You guys, I know a lot of you in here, all of us in here in some way, we just want to be comforted. We just want to feel what we want to feel. We want to feel in control. We want to not be afraid of the unknown, so we'll do whatever we need to do to know whatever we need to know. And so it wasn't that these people were going, look, this is just too long. And they begin to consider, all right, how can we get the feels back? See, guaranteed, they got the feels walking through the Red Sea. They got the feels following the pillar of fire and the pillar of smoke. They got the feels when God from the sky declares what we now understand and know to be the 10 Commandments. Okay, those are the things like, all right, I can get on board with that. I can trust in that God. But this God who's disappeared up onto the mountain, this God who we haven't seen any evidence of in about 40 days, they're going, all right, well, what can we do now? What are we supposed to do to feel God, to know God, to be in control of God again in our life? And I want to throw that out to you to consider, how do you compensate for God? In what ways in your life, maybe you've prayed about it, and you've been coming to church, and you've been doing the religion thing, and you're trying to be faithful, and it's not a thing of you don't believe in God. It's not a thing where you're like, oh, I'm now a pagan, or I don't have faith anymore. You're just in a place where you're going, I want to feel something, or I want to be in control. I want to be able to know what I'm navigating and know what's going on. Very similar to what the people were feeling while Moses was gone. And they're like, in the actual biblical text, it says the people began to ask, so what about this Moses guy? Like, wait a minute. This is the Moses guy that God used to free them from Egypt. This is the Moses guy who raised his staff and the seas parted. This is the Moses guy. Wow, how quickly we just move on to the next thing. How quickly we just go, oh, well, this isn't happening as quick as I want it to, or I'm having to suffer and struggle a little longer than I'd prefer. And it's not saying it's not difficult. I'm not trying to minimize what you're going through. But what these people did, in spite of seeing God move in miraculous ways, went, yeah, but I think maybe we need to consider another plan. How do we need to compensate for God? And maybe in your life, maybe it's in friendships, where you're afraid that God's not going to send you friends that will encourage your faith, or that you're going to really enjoy and are going to hold you accountable and are going to love you unconditionally. So you'll just compensate for God and be friends with whoever will be friends with you. And so you end up being friends with people that you have no business, that are not encouraging your faith, they're drawing you away. Maybe it's success, and you don't know what God's plan for you is, and so you're like, oh, I'm not sure whether God has a good plan for me that's going to let me be what I want to be, so I'm going to take control, and I'm going to plot my own course, and I'm going to blaze my own trail because I'm not sure, and we compensate for God. Maybe it's with forgiving somebody, and you're not sure what God's going to do about the way that they wronged you. And so you're holding back forgiveness because, I don't want them to think that they got away with something. Or I don't know whether God is a just God and there's going to be justice. So I'm going to take it into my own hands and I'm going to punish that person by not talking to them or by being rude to them. How do you compensate for God? And I think we all do it. Because there are times, for sure, that faith is hard. When Moses disappeared up onto that mountain, faith got hard. So, they come up with a way to compensate for God. They're like, okay, if we can just do something physical, then we'll feel better. So they go to Aaron. And Aaron had been a leader. Aaron had been with Moses. And so they go to Aaron and they're like, we need you to do something physical. We need you to put something together physical so that we can worship God. Because if we can't see it, hear it, taste it, touch it, feel it, then how are we supposed to worship? How are we supposed to know God's real? So we need you to do something, to make us something so that we can get the feels again. Aaron, again, not because he didn't believe in God, he was probably a little freaked out because the people all came at him and went, you better do something. You better get us something. And so Aaron calls everybody together and says, okay, collect all the earrings, collect all the gold, collect all the stuff that people have, maybe that they had plundered from other people, as they moved into cities and overtook cities, things that they had collected. Bring it all here. And it says that he took all that gold and he melted it down and he made a cow. And Chick-fil-A was born. No. And I'm not sure why the cow. There may have been some cultural significance in a cow or something. But he takes all this gold and he melts it down into a cow. And now Aaron's not sure what's going on up on the mountain either. So some of this was, hey, I'm doing what the people want me to do, but some of this was going to be in him of going, look, I'm going to feel better. And if this is a way to kind of like a snack before dinner, if it's going to hold people over, if it's going to be something, and you guys, we do that, where it's like, oh, you know what, I don't know, what God's doing, and I'm feeling, so I know I'll go worship at the cow idol of youth group. I'll go worship at the cow idol of my detour group. I'll go worship at the cow idol of Sunday morning to kind of tide me over. And we start worshiping we start worshiping feelings. We start worshiping emotion. We start worshiping the people around us and being like, oh, well, as long as I see Carter worshiping, well, then I'll really feel God. As long as I see Chris there, I'll know that there's a spiritual leader there, and I'm going to feel a lot better. And so Aaron takes all this stuff, and he goes, all right, I've made this cow. And then he says, tomorrow We will celebrate with a festival to the Lord. Wait a minute. Aaron, you just made an idol. God, just like 6 chapters earlier, said, don't make idols out of gold, out of silver. Aaron, you made one out of gold. You did exactly what God said not to do. And now Aaron's going, hey guys, okay, we have our idol, and tomorrow we will have a festival to the Lord. And I just want to point this out, that this is the kind of trap that we can fall into as well. That because we still believe, and we'll come to church and we say we believe in God, we say we believe in Jesus, we say all these things, that we then somehow justify, but I can serve this idol of whatever it is. This idol of popularity, this idol of success, this idol of power, this idol, whatever your cow idol is. But I can still worship God. In fact, I can do this idol worship in the name of God. And the reality of it is this, that when the truth of God is distorted, it will always result in idolizing the flesh. Always. When we take the truth of God, of what God calls us to, and we twist it, it always twists and points back to us. It always twists and makes us focus on us. What can I feel? What can I do? How can I look a certain way? How can I get what I want? How can I be successful enough, popular enough, smart enough? It always twists to point back to us whenever we distort the truth of God. And this is what they did. They distorted what God had said when he said, don't make idols. They're like, just a little one. And it's a cow. Who doesn't like a cow? Right? So we'll make a cow idol. But we're still going to celebrate the Lord. Well, here's what happens. The next morning, everybody sleeps in. They wake up, and the cow is still there. They're like, whoa! Cow time! And they start to celebrate. And it probably started worshiping God. Celebrating their freedom, but they focused it on this cow, not because I don't think they actually believed the cow had any power, but they made this a representative of God. And they start to worship, and then because that is not supposed to be the object of their affection, the worship gets twisted. And they start to party. And their focus goes completely off the rails. And God's word, the Bible, describes it like this. And they began to participate in every pagan celebration. You want to get really detailed? Everybody was drunk out of their minds, having sex with everybody, doing whatever they wanted to do, whatever they felt like they wanted to do, because the object, the focus of their worship was way off. It wasn't on the true God. This is why God goes, you must not have any idols. This is why God said, you must not entertain all these other cultures that don't focus on me, because they're going to cause you to focus on all these other things. And so they start to party, they start to do everything, and all of a sudden you look at that and you're like, what happened to God? But it all started with, hey, where's Moses? Well, maybe Moses isn't coming back, so we don't know what God's doing, so we're going to compensate. And it's just going to be a little compensation. It's going to be a little cow. No harm in making a little cow. And that started to become their focus. And they started to tiptoe out into doing things, even in the name of God, going, this will be okay. Broke my heart about 9 years ago. There was a girl who had been in youth group, had been really involved in youth group. I know had a personal relationship with Jesus. And she started hanging out with some people toward the end of high school, and this was not a group of people that was going to encourage or strengthen her faith. And they did lots of partying and things, and for a long time she was like, oh no, I don't go to parties with them. I'm trying to live and be a light to them and show them Jesus, and I'm not participating in it at all. And then I remember one day she stopped by church, and she was sitting in my office, and she said, yeah, no, actually, like, I've started going to the parties because it's there that people need Jesus. And people, I want to be a good example in the situation, and I can even tell people, hey, you shouldn't do that. A while later, a few weeks later, she, and I were talking, and she's like, yeah, no, but it everybody's drinking, and like, if you're not doing that, well, then they're not going to listen to me. They're not going to, and you could see things start to twist, and you could see truth being lost as she began to worship not God and not live according to what he had called her to, and to stay away from the things that he called her to stay away from, but began compromising and began adjusting things and justifying, oh no, I still love Jesus, still love God, yeah. And it became a thing where on a weekly basis she was at parties getting drunk. And one day she came into my office and had tears in her eyes and was like, I don't know how I got here. She had just come back from the doctor, and the doctor had told her that she had contracted a sexually transmitted disease. As she just became part of what she was exposed to. And these people of God who had seen the miracles of God were so afraid that God wasn't going to show up, that God wasn't going to do what they wanted him to do, or that he was taking too long and they shouldn't have to wait any longer. And so they begin to compensate for God. They begin to go, oh, well, maybe we need to step in and take the power. Maybe we need to step in. And God goes, hey, Moses, quickly go down the mountain. He says, your people that you brought out of Egypt, it's funny, God changed all this time. God has been referring to them as my people. And suddenly God goes, hey, these people that you brought out of Egypt, they've corrupted themselves. Go and deal with this, right? And so Moses goes down, and there's lots more to the story, and there's the reality of, well, the rest of the Old Testament is God trying to fix this, and God having to redeem what these people had given up as they tried to compensate for God. So for you, in your life, and we're going to talk about this in our detour groups, but I want this to be really personal. I don't want this just to be a story that you heard from the Bible, and oh yeah, I remember this story, the golden cow, yeah, that's... For you, what idol are you worshiping just in case? Because we have corrupted ourselves by worshiping things like likes on social media. We've corrupted ourselves when we start to value and worship the opinion of other people over what God has called us to. We have corrupted ourselves when we believe that what the culture has to offer is more valuable and more what we need than what God says he has for us. We've corrupted ourselves when we believe what the people around us say we are or say we should be, and we abandon who God says we are. And that leads to insecurity, it leads to shame, it leads to all these things where we go, why am I feeling so abandoned by God? God has not abandoned you. I want to challenge you to consider this, and we're going to talk, like I said, we're going to talk about this in detour groups. What idol are you worshiping? And again, it might be something involving social media. It might be something involving making the team. It might be something involving getting a guy to like you. It might be, what is the idol that you are worshiping? you know, just in case God isn't faithful, just in case God doesn't do what he promises to do in being with us always and loving us unconditionally. So as we go to detour groups, and I want to encourage you as we go to not lose this in terms of we all get up and like blah, and when we go to our rooms, everybody's running around and let's try and be focused as we go to our detour groups and really consider this. And some of you need people to pray with you. You need to confess some things. You need to acknowledge some ways, and this may mean letting your guard down. This may mean not holding on to your pride and acting like, oh, you've got it covered. Oh, you need people to walk with you. You need people to pray with you. And in our detour groups, in our discussions, we're going to have some time to pray for one another, to surrender these idols that we have made so important. And maybe you don't even think they're all that important. You're like, no, well, Jeff, me caring about how many views my Instagram got or how many likes I got, it's not an idol. I'm not like bowing down to it. Some of you are. And it may not be on your knees, face to the floor kind of bowing, but your heart is absolutely bowed to this. Getting that boy to like you, getting that girl to like you, getting straight A's, getting whatever it may not be a bowing with your face to the floor kind of bowing, but your heart is absolutely controlled because you're worshiping these things and you're believing these things are more important than what if God has something different?